So my talk is a mathematical way of looking at the brain. So I have a mathematical logic of action potentials, particularly, and making connection between the roots of the thoughts and the zeros of mathematics. So to begin with my slides, I have the four fundamental questions as a matrix of four things here dealing with the brain, the organ of many. So this is one of the mystery organs we have been working with, and still it's our frontier. So the first question is what is matter? Second is what's life? And the third is what's information? And the last one, what is mind? So the what's matter lead us to study physics and chemistry, and what's life bring us to the biology to see what is a DNA. That is a breakthrough for us to understand our blueprints in our life. And what's information, what we're doing now, and going towards what is mind. And certainly all those things here, there's a philosophical issues here that, so my philosophy is that unity in multiplicity, diversity from unity, and unity in diversity and multiplicity from unity. So this is one of the quote I always want to put here is that what I cannot create, I do not understand, by Richard Feynman, famous physicist who is a Nobel laureate. And as you see, we want to assemble the pieces into a beautiful the car. And before we do that, we have to understand all the pieces. So briefly, here's my outline of the talks. We'll have three parts. The first part deals with the three principles of a brain and mind relation. And the second part covers some of the universal structure of a human thought. And the third part covers thinking kernels and zeros of mathematics. So we'll go through those three parts and complete all those reports here. The first part is based on some of the research done by Professor Astroy. His recent publications on the trees of the brain and the roots of the mind, published in 2015. So the main message of the book is that present us to understand our brain, connecting subjective experience with the shapes and the forms of neurons. So which is not just dealing with the materials, there's some other experiences are part of the game. So that is a main message of his publication. Certainly, we want to look at simple neurons and look at its structure, ranging from the cell body to axon to dendrites, all that. So here is a basic element of our study here. So when you look at those, the simple neuron, and we have those images, and which make a connection between our brain with the nature forest. And so we look at one of the things that is a membrane potentials. This is mainly will lead me to discuss the possible mathematical logic behind our brain. So when you look at action potential during the membrane potential, so you can see here, this illustrates primarily three kinds of potential. One is a resting potential, the other is a graded potential, then move up to the action potential. So what are the mathematical logic behind those three primary types of potentials, from resting to graded to action? So we look at those three kinds of potentials and making connection with the mathematical logic currently in place. So we look at those the actions or the process. This is a basic information from neuroscience and covers the progressing of the movement of the potentials from resting to action. So there's all those logical gates in the middle of the logistics, how things are controlled from open to close to on and off. And what it is that we observe that there's primarily two sides of it. One is the analog side of it, in the threshold from resting to graded potential. And once we reach the action potential, then you will see there is only two possibilities, either all or none. So that's where the binary logic thinking kicks in, connecting to action potential. Before the action potential is other kinds of activities that will lead to our fuzzy logic in mathematics. So will be the combination of fuzzy logic and binary logic, make a connection of those activities here. So the first principle of the brain and the mind, and one of the things that has confirmed was that mental states, our mental states, corresponding to the patterns of spikes in the nervous system. So this is a very important relationship. We already know all the electric spikes in the brain, it connects to our thoughts and connects to our patterns of thinking. So that is a very important connection, because when we see that, any thought, emotion, perceptions, intention, so that will be connected to our electric activities inside our brain. The second principle dealing with the learning. One of the marvelous properties of a brain is able to learn, adapt to the situation. So learning as an acquisition of the potential to instate the previous unknown materials, then you corresponding to change of connections in the circuits of the neurons. So this is defined as a second principle, or as a learning acquisition. So change of the neural synaptic connection connects to the synapses formulation and elimination. So then the third principle, which is also an interesting one, which connects the axonal dendritic overlaps. This overlap is important. Without overlap, the neural correlation with the capability of learning will be the issues. So this is one of the things already building our brain has this ability allow us to connect the capability of learning and with a neural connection. So that's the first part of the three principles, dealing with the mental states and the electric spikes. And then the second part is from outside of the surface. We look at our universal structure of human thought, what we're thinking. So primarily by the Paul and Elder model of thinking expressions. So they give us 8 categories, ranging from the point of view to the purpose and to the questions, all that the process has been wheeled into elements of a thought. So that's from outside. We look at our thinking, look at what is expressed outside. So now we try to see the communication between our thought from outside to the inside of the brain as a black box. So one of the areas in the mathematics, computer science, and physics was dealing with the cybernetics. So which is a recursive process of creating a stable state from input to output. So the input will be primarily our 5 senses, the inputs from sight, hearing, touch, and taste and smell. All those are the input, the information, and this information will be taken into our brain and how we came up with those things. Then also once you come up, it's going to feed back as well. So this is the communication as a part of a cybernetics study. So one of the things that we observed is that by many of the scientists and philosophers, and so basically we are a self-preserving, self-creating, and locked in the mirrors. So we are basically is miracles of self-reference. So this is a famous quotation by Douglas Hofstadter. And this fundamental self-referencing really is captured by a self-reference paradox equation. So which means A equal to not A. And typically we will say either or yes, 0, 1, but actually there is a state where A is the not A. if you look at this equation to look at the mathematical solution, it turns out this is corresponding to the midpoint of the truth from 0 to 1. So it is a 1/2 in the middle. So when we make a connection from the surface and to the thinking, look at our brain inside, so it has been well studied. Every part of the brain has its own function and also its coordination. So this slide captures all the connections of our thinking. For example, the frontal lobe dealing with the thinking, dealing with the memory and the many other functions. So this is a pathway for us to see from outside of expression, get inside of a brain. So continue on. So we want to study mathematical way of doing the logic. So the brain, in fact, can be defined as a mixture of A and not A, which is a law of identity. So which is also an equation of self-referencing. So now the thinking kernels, which is a terminology that I introduced as spikes, interactions of neural synapses. These thinking kernels can be also seen as zeros of roots of mathematical relations. So we know binary logic, we know fuzzy logic. So in our brain, it's a combination of binary logic. So it's a combination of fuzzy and binary working as a whole. So a model we are proposing is a mind as a motion of a matrix of a matter as a structure, and meaning as information, and the emotion as energy. So three things form collectively a shape of the idea. So early publication by Wolf-Grunster dealing with the mathematical study of human thoughts. So he summarized all those key ideas of the thoughts. One of them is that human thought has a geometric structure. And also structure of a mind is a hierarchic and architectic, and with the composition as a fundamental operation. So mind creates new ideas using operation of encapsulation, and association is all. So no special metaphysical construct is needed. So basically, those are the, as you can see, there's many other ideas how to define it. So based on his study of calculus of idea, so I connect what the relationship between fuzzy and binary logic. So there's a fundamental shift as we experience it today. We all know that the binary play with the numbers, which is what our computer is doing today. Nowadays, when we hear the AI or large language model, we're dealing with the words, the perceptions. So one of the main article by the father of fuzzy logic, as you see on my slides, is dealing with the manipulation or perception. So what currently we are doing that is thinking with the words, so which AI is based upon. So when you have an initial question being requested, then the AI system will prompt a response to us. So this is a major shift of the paradigm from numbers to words. So the fuzzinary model of thinking is a combination of the binary and the fuzzy. So the binary go to extreme. So that's where we make decision. And the fuzzy is preparation as a graded or resting potential, allow me to swing back and forth until you hit a spark. When you have intersection as a highlighted as those blue dots, those are defined as a thinking kernel. So it goes through sort of a double helix kind of structure when you have intersections. So this thinking kernel has a very important properties, although we basically it's like a spikes. So as part of action potentials, and it can go from the one state to another states and move along. So basically, I want to define mathematically what is idea. So how do we describe idea as a unit of our thinking? So the idea is comprised of the point with the three fundamental entities of a shape and numbers and relation. So this is a unified identity as idea. Let me quickly move on. I think my time is getting up. So it can be put into a critical strip. This critical strip can be described as a matrix. So you have an initial point. This can be reflected into other three with this kind of conjugate and reflective and conjugate reflective. So become a thinking kernel inside. So now you can see when you connect those 4 points, an intersection comes into play as a thinking kernel. So there is some mathematical model dealing with this kind of distribution, how those kernels are moving along, and that has been proposed. And this connects to the early proposal I defined as a central dogma of informatics, going from data inside our brain to the information and to the knowledge. So this process is defined similar to what we have in the microbiology, from DNA to RNA to proteins. And this is from data as replication, information as a transformation, and knowledge as application. So this is a three element entity becomes one of the central dogma of informatics. And this leads us to the current self-organizing system, which I refer that as the global brain, connects all our people information with the communication technologies. So this is a visual display how our nodes are connected through the internet. And I have the left side is the brain. So we kind of simulate what is a relationship between a human brain and network brain. So eventually we have a final central dogma of thought through the thinking kernels inside the black box of a brain, and with the thinking expressions of external and the communication open box. So this is the proposed the mechanism from thinking from inside and to outside expressions. And I will, with this genetic music notes, to say thank you all for your attention.